Back about 6 months ago, I began to produce a new series of YouTube teachings, and I begin to tell you that there is a final tsunami wave of God's Spirit that is coming upon the earth, a final supernatural tsunami wave of revival that God is sending upon the earth before judgment hits America and before judgment hits the world. A final supernatural tsunami wave of signs, wonders, and miracles, and a great ingathering of souls, a final tsunami wave. Let me read it a third time. Then this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14. Now, if we're able to put it on the screen, I want to show you a picture of a little chapel. It's called Asbury Chapel, and this is at the university in Wilmore, Kentucky. And if you've been watching, we had over 100,000 people attended a revival at Asbury Chapel. Over 100,000 people attended a revival that broke out in this little chapel in Wilmore, Kentucky. Over 100,000 people. It went viral. And you say, well, what happened? Well, let me give you a little preface to what happened. They have chapel services there on campus. It's a Christian college, Asbury College. And they have chapel services. And on February the 8th of this year, of 2023, they had a chapel service there at Asbury College. And the young people were there worshiping. I know in the past it used to be a 50-minute service, probably still the same. And after the chapel service was over with, February the 8th of 2023, 20 students decided to linger. They decided to stay there. And they continued to worship and pray for each other. And the glory of God came down. There's Asbury Chapel, February the 8th of 2023. And those 20 students got in under the spout where the glory was coming out. And so everybody else had left the chapel after the chapel service, but these 20 students lingered and continued to worship and continued to pray. And a supernatural presence of God came down, and revival broke out in this little chapel called Asbury Chapel. And it's named, of course, after John Asbury, who was in the 1800s. He was a Methodist circuit rider. John Asbury was, and he traveled on horseback. He had one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. A lot of the circuit riders, gospel circuit riders back then, they were killed by wild animals or killed by Indians as they traveled across America preaching the gospel. And so this chapel was named in his honor. And amazingly, God has chosen to send a revival that has swept the world twice through this little chapel that is named after this powerful Methodist minister. Well, in this little town of 6,000 people in Kentucky, at this Christian university, over 100,000 people attended a revival that broke out in that little chapel, and it went nonstop, day in and day out, hour after hour. No one wanted to leave that chapel. The glory of God fell in that chapel. I was reading about a pastor that came in as the revival finally wound down into his church there in Kentucky, in the same town the campus was in. And I saw the pictures on the internet. A glory cloud had filled his church before services ever started. It was a divine visitation of God's Spirit. And now revival is breaking out among the youth. And the Asbury revival that started on February the 8th, they said there was a surreal peace in that building as people would come in and out of that little chapel, and that revival that went on day after day, hour after hour, nonstop. And that revival swept the world. It swept the world. And we have revivals now breaking out on high school and college campuses all over the world as a result of that visitation that God sent to Asbury College on February the 8th of 2023. And so now we have a revival that has begun to sweep the world, and it's breaking out on campuses and all over America, and not just all over America, but people flew into that revival from all over the world. And so now they've taken that revival back, and it's breaking out among high school and college students all over the world.